Welcome everyone. Today's webinar is about the tasks and challenges when translating medical translations. Medical is a huge area, but more or less it's divided in pharmaceuticals and medical devices. Today we will focus on pharmaceuticals. We have the pleasure to interview a Danish medical translator, Charlotte Razal. Since 2010, Charlotte has been working with us as a freelance translator, offering medical translations. We are also interviewing the senior project manager, Philip Philipsen, who is in charge of several Danish medical client accounts. He regularly works with Charlotte. My name is Ylva Gravengard, and I'm Supplier Relations Manager at LanguageWire. With me today, I also have Lisa Guldberg, who many of you may know as a project manager. However, since July, Lisa is working with me at the Supplier Relations Department. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat module, and Lisa will read them out anonymously at the end of the session. So the first 20 to 25 minutes is about the interview, and the last 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, we take the questions. So I give the word to you, Charlotte, so you can introduce yourself.
Yes, hi. Well, as Ylva said, my name is Charlotte, and I have been working for 8 years now as a freelance translator. And before that, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry as a regulatory coordinator, and that is how I got introduced to this area of work.
Thank you. So I will start with a question to you, Philip. What background do these pharmaceutical translators that you usually work with have?
Well, I think we can say that most of them, they come from within the natural sciences. They may have a degree from university, could be in biochemistry, could be biology. We also see some doctors every now and then, and definitely a few nurses. And then we have what I think is an interesting category, people who were never trained in the medical profession, but still they managed to train themselves or were trained at a company to be able to work within the pharmaceutical area. And I think there are actually only a few people who are really good medical translators and who don't have a formal background within the natural sciences. And actually, Charlotte, that's why you're here today. One of the reasons, because I know you well, and if I remember correctly, your background is one of those not very typical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a language background.
Yeah.
I do not have any scientific education, but as you said, I was trained in the industry and learned a lot of things during the years where I worked there. Right. So combining this education in the industry with my language background, yeah, that's how I got into it.
But how did you do it? I mean, how did the company training you do it? Because it's really specialized to work as a regulatory coordinator.
Yes, I didn't know anything about this area when I joined the company. So I was trained by my colleagues, learning me about the procedures to follow. About submissions, we will maybe talk a bit about that later.
Yeah.
All of the requirements, procedures, and so on, and just working from day to day. And I have always been working with translations, but this was very specific. So people helped me, and my texts were approved by my colleagues, and so on. So during the years, that's how I was trained.
Mm-hmm. Oh, can I ask you? If you had to be honest,
yeah.
How long did it take you before you understood what am I doing?
It took quite some months. Yeah. Yeah. So in the beginning, I was feeling like I was working in the dark, but I had some very good colleagues who helped me, and I also joined some seminars, webinars, courses, different education with for instance, with the authorities.
Right.
Sometimes they have some seminars or things that you
Right.
can, where you can.
So the medical authorities for
Yes.
Denmark.
Yes, in Denmark,
Okay.
DKMA,
Right.
and in the company as well. Once in a while, they did some training for new people,
Right.
telling us about the procedures, the templates, and so
Right.
on. So that's how I began to understand what I was actually doing.
Was it an
Right.
exception of the company to employ you who didn't have any experience, or was it the way they usually worked?
It was not usual, I think, because most of my colleagues were pharmacists. But I was employed in the beginning to help with different tasks, and then I had the opportunity to take over little by little the translations in-house instead of sending them out, and so I trained myself in the area.
So what would you say, Charlotte, is so, particular about these pharmaceutical translations?
Well, it's a very regulated area where you have to follow specific templates, first of all. Some of the most common text that we receive are the SPC pill and labeling documents that follow a drug during its lifetime, and they have to be based on specific templates that you can find on the European Medicines Agency website. What is particular also is that the translations need to be approved. So it is very important that they live up to all the standards, all the regulations and so on, to be approved by the authorities.
But can I ask you, Charlotte?
Yes.
What kind of regulations do you have in mind? I mean, what is required for like a SPC or a pill to be approved?
Well, first of all, maybe I should say a word about the procedure to follow.
Right.
Yeah. So when a medical company wants to put a drug on the market,
right.
they have to submit an application to get a marketing authorization. And in Europe, that they follow a very specific procedure during which they submit the English version of the product information.
Right.
This procedure takes about 6 to 8 months, and when the procedure is finalized and the English document is approved, then they have to submit national translations of that document to the national authorities in each country where they want to have this authorization. So what is specific here also is that the deadlines are very tight. Once the English version is approved, the company has 5 days to submit the national translation. Then the national agency will review that translation and approve it if it lives up to the standards and so on. So it's also an area where very often we work with very tight deadlines. So to answer your question,
yes.
First of all, you need to go to the European Medicines Agency and find the correct template for your country.
Right.
And then you have the English version. You translate it into the. I work with Danish, so I use the Danish template and I translate it into the Danish template. Then you have some other standards you need to follow. That could be the EDQM.
What's that? You have to explain.
EDQM is well, it's a European how should I say, committee or something who makes this database with standard terms. It could be the pharmaceutical form, the correct term for a tablet or packaging, or so. It has all these terms in the European languages.
Right.
And this is an open database?
This is an open database. I think you have to register on the website. You get a password and so on. and then you can look these terms up, and that is very important, of course. Then each country usually has a set of standards, drug standards also, for active ingredients and dosage forms, etc.
Right.
So you can usually find them. I know in Denmark we can find them on the agency's website, and I guess that is the case in most countries. So there are different templates, standards, and so on you need to know about. In Denmark, you can find information on the Danish agency about all these standards and so on. Also, different articles about how to make a good translation and so on.
It sounds like you could even do an introductory course about this, actually.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
And before you mentioned PIL and SPC, can you just briefly explain to the non-medical translators listening what this is?
Yes. So, as I said, every drug has certain information attached to it that follows it during its lifetime. There is a document for doctors and healthcare professionals called the Summary of Product Characteristics, the SPC. Mentioning all the indications for use, side effects, pharmacokinetics, ingredients, and so on. This document is then also made in another version for the patient. This is the PIL, the Patient Information Leaflet. This is the notice that you find in your package when you go to the pharmacy and buy your medicine, where all of these things are explained to the patient. So the dosage, the side effects you might experience, and so on. And then there is a labeling document, which is used for it's the information that you find on the package. So a very short dosage, ingredients, and so on.
Philip, when you work with these medical client accounts, I know you have had so many different client accounts, but what makes it really particular for you as a project manager to handle these medical accounts?
I think, first of all, the most important is people. I rely on experts like Charlotte because I have no formal training within the life sciences. So my role is to know the framework, basically whom to contact, and also, of course, I have to have some basic knowledge about the procedures that happen at the drug companies. So basically, the most important thing for me relates to the work you do, and Ylva and you, Lisa, sourcing the right people for the right specializations. Now, Charlotte, she mentioned SPC and PIL, but we have many others within diabetes, cardiology, and oncology. So those would often require specialists that have sometimes a different skill set. And for this reason, it's really important that as a medical translator that you register the exact domain specialization that you have, and that you can also document it. So in the case of Charlotte, someone who comes from the regulatory side and turns translator, that's just a fantastic combination. We also have other translators who come from the regulatory side, and it gives us a unique insight into what's actually going on. Yeah.
Great. Charlotte, what are your biggest challenges in your daily work as a medical translator?
Well, we already talked a bit about it, but it's probably my background, since I do not have a scientific background. I often have to do a lot of research, reading, to understand fully what the subject consists of, what I'm working with. So that's my biggest challenge, I think. And then there's the time aspect also, as I mentioned, very tight deadlines often. So when you work with medical translations, you often have to accept also working during the evenings, weekends, and so on to meet these deadlines and keep the customer happy.
Yeah.
So if I may, you mentioned submission, and I know that there are these submission windows at the drug companies.
Yes.
And now let's say they for some reason don't submit in time. What happens?
Well, what happens is that the agency might not have time to assess the translation.
Right.
So as long as the translation is not, because there are windows planned for months ahead, where an assessor will review the document and give the approval. So what you need to know is that when a company wants to market a product, they want to market it as quick as possible, of course.
Right.
So if you don't submit in time, you will get extra delay, and you cannot market your product until you have this authorization. So there's no excuse. You have to submit within the 5 days.
It sounds like a dangerous combination with, I mean, medical translations and short deadlines. So
yes,
yeah.
And of course, it's a regulated area. You can't put something on the market if it's not correct, and the authorities don't excuse you. So if there's anything wrong with the document you submit, you will receive them back and be asked to correct them, and that's something that the company doesn't like.
Did you ever, I mean, we all do mistakes, so did you ever make a mistake that went, I mean, all the way through and that caused a problem for the company?
I'm sure I make mistakes like everyone, but I haven't experienced a case where the translation was refused or no.
Many translators are wondering about having like insurances in case there are any complaints or effects. Do you as a medical translator have that and consider that important?
I don't have it personally. No. Could be an idea. I don't know if it's possible to do that.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
But, so let me see. Charlotte, where do you do your research? You mentioned a few places before,
Yes,
of course, but do you have any other like associations or sites?
Well, today it's possible to do practically all research online, and it depends on the subject, of course. But I would say that, let's say, for instance, that you get a text related to an anti-diabetic. I would then start searching, for instance, on corporate websites. I wouldn't want to mention any names here, but we all know which companies market which products, etc. So I would go there. I would go to patient associations, for instance, where you can find a lot of information written in a language that is comprehensible. So I would do that. I would then go on searching for more specific professional texts, maybe websites for healthcare professionals. In Denmark, for instance, that could be Lægehåndbogen, Medicin.dk. Of course, again, the agencies also often have documents on their websites. It could be hospital guidelines, procedures, whatever. So I search. I do a lot of free search on the internet, and I read a lot.
Yeah. But I mean, you said you've been doing this for 8 years, right?
Yeah.
And even now, you keep on having to do research.
Yes.
That's incredible, actually.
Yes, but every product is specific.
Yeah.
And new products arrive all the time. New treatments arrive all the time. So yes, there's a lot of reading in this area.
And please do write your questions in the chat module, because then we can start looking at them and take them at the end of the session. Yeah, also for terminology, how do you work with that? How do you build up your own TM or, yeah, term base?
Yes. Well, as I said, there are some terms that you just need to take from certain databases. The EDQM, again, is a must. Also, some of the templates, for instance, side effects, have to follow a specific template also with specific terms. Of course, I work with my personal TM that is built up over the years. Then I have my medical dictionaries. I prefer online versions also to keep them updated all the time. But I must say that very often you cannot find a specific term in a dictionary. Again, you have to do a lot of research, reading a lot of articles. I usually start by, I work with English to Danish, so I usually start finding some articles in English concerning the specific topic, read it, and then find, usually it's a bit harder, but I try to find the most articles possible in Danish, and then you have to compare terminology and so on to find the exact term.
So you work in STL Trados, right?
Yes, of course.
So do you use the multi-term and have your own general term base that you can apply for?
Actually, I don't use term bases very much. I'm a bad person maybe, but the TM, of course, always. But again, it's each product is so specific and each area is so specific that you need to do a lot of research every time.
Philip, when you have a medical translation and you get it back, do you, trust that the translator have checked all these terms, or do you have to go in and double check terms and
I would say in general we rely on the translator and the proofreader, because there often is a proofreader as well, especially for regulatory material. Again, that's the SPC and PIL. So the expertise that LanguageWire provides is really the expertise that comes from the translators, from the proofreaders. And again, this comes back to the quality of the teams that we assemble, and which you also help prepare for not only Danish but many other languages. So what I check as a project manager is part of our final check procedure in general, and this involves checking, was everything translated? Did we follow the client's instructions? Were there certain parts that we had to reuse wording from an old document? Little things like that I always verify before we deliver to the client. So this means that the expert stuff, that we do rely on the translators to complete correctly for us.
Great.
I may have just a small thing to that. Talking about translation memories and so on, I think we need to mention also that 100% match is not always a correct match. In medical translations, it depends on the type of document. So you may have a 100% match coming from a SPC, but you're working in a PIL. So the wording in a SPC will not be the same in the PIL, if you understand. It's directed at two different publics.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a small note.
Yeah. Charlotte, are you also doing like medical equipment, or do you mainly focus on the pharmaceutical?
I do medical devices also, which is a completely different area. So I have to evaluate on a case-to-case basis if that is something I can do. And it's important also to know your restrictions. So if I find the text is outside my expertise, I don't take it on. So it depends on the kind of device, I'd say.
Yeah.
Charlotte, can I say something to that just briefly? Yeah. Because you mentioned that as a translator, it's important to know just how far can you go.
Yes.
Where does your expertise stop? And I recall many years ago, I think in 2009, when I was very new to medical translation as a project manager, a colleague and I, we got called up by a nice lady with it turned out a pill, like a patient information leaflet, requiring specialist knowledge actually about these templates you mentioned. And we said, yes, we can do this, it's not a problem. And we put the best medical translator team on it, and we delivered the best translation we could. And we got a phone call back, and the client was furious. What have you done? This is ridiculous. And we said, no, it's not. It's a very good translation. And it turned out that it was maybe in isolation a good translation, but the team didn't know anything about these templates you mentioned.
Yeah.
So that was my entry into medical translation expertise, and I learned a lot from that. So it's just one more reason to know your people and for the people to know how far they can go.
Yeah. So Philip, if you would put it in bullets, what do you expect from a medical translator?
Well, I do expect some domain expertise, and I think a lot of that comes from also a personality that as a person you know your, of course you know your limits, you know your own area well enough to say that this is where as far as I can go, and the rest I will leave to someone else. So accuracy for sure. We need people to pay attention to detail. You mentioned maybe some cases where things have gone horribly wrong all the way. I recall a case ages ago, not from us, but where a simple painkiller got the wrong dosage indicated, and it was a really bad case for that company. But these things happen, so the only way to work around it is to make sure you've got your quality checks in place, your CAT tool, but also that you've got hopefully a good team, not only the translator but a good proofreader, and that everything is checked thoroughly. Also numbers, because numbers often get put on the side because it's not really a translation, but numbers affect the translation enormously. So I would put number one as accuracy, and also, this is just me personally, but I like to see when someone can admit when they made a mistake. I make loads of those, and I try to just say, okay, I made a mistake, let's not do that again. How do we avoid it? So also someone willing to work with us in establishing a good process for avoiding mistakes. So that's where the partnership comes in, and I think the best translators we have also work with us in that way, that we establish good procedures together.
Good. What I've been told about like PIL and SPCs is that they have so specific formats. So if the source, for example, says put this pill in a glass of water, then according to the pill format, maybe you have to write something rather different to this. Is this just a prejudice I have, Charlotte, or is it like that? And can you give an example?
An example, you caught me a bit off guard there. No, it's certainly there are some standard sentences that you should use and that are part of the template. I cannot find an example like that from.
But surely there are cases where actually you would translate it, just when looking at a sentence, you would translate it one way, but say there's a template or an approved wording from some other source, you would use that even though it's not really what it says.
Yeah, sure, of course. So that's what you just need to except
Yeah.
that sometimes there is a standard sentence, and you may think that you could find a better one, but that's just
yeah.
how it is.
So if you have any questions out there, please type them now, because we only have like a few minutes left. So you're welcome to type your questions now. And yeah, I wanted to ask Charlotte, if you are a translator, but you're a beginner, you're new to medical translations, so what would you recommend a person? I mean, a person with a background like yourself, who are not a scientific background, is it a good idea to specialize at all in this? Or how long time does it take to get to become efficient? And
yes, well, I got introduced to this, as I said, by working in the industry, and that is actually how I learned all of these things. I would say that just getting started like that is difficult. There are so many specific things you need to do when you work with this kind of document. So that would certainly require some training. Maybe something you could consider offering.
Did you ever train any other translators?
No, I think I did some things with you in the beginning. I think we made some kind of document that we proposed to other translators, if I remember correctly. But no, I haven't had the opportunity to do that.
I think we have a question.
Yeah, we have just one question here.
Yes.
The translator is asking, do you sometimes regret having chosen this specialization, as it is rather hard and demanding?
No.
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 Clear no.
It is. Well, I was very happy working in the industry, but I have always loved translating, and when I decided to start as a freelancer, well, it's the best decision I ever took, and I like this kind of work. I like to spend time finding the correct term and look for things and learn more about specific treatments and so on. So you have to like it, and I do.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, any more questions? Or
No, not
right
at the
now.
moment.
Yeah.
No.
So if you have a final question, hurry up. Now is the time. And Philip, do you have any recommendations to the medical or pharma translators out there? Something you would like to ask for their profiles, for example, in our platform, that they indicate, so it becomes easier for you as a project manager to source them? And
well, apart from the picture, you can see my picture. I like to see yours. I think definitely list your specializations. The more specializations you have, the better we can assign work to you. So this goes not only for the actual work areas that you can specify within medical and healthcare. It also goes, it could be a personal note with your expertise. Maybe you were a nurse, or you trained with a doctor for a while, or you just happen to know a lot about diabetes for whatever reason. Well, that's very useful information for us. So I know that Ylva and Lisa are very happy to record this for you on your profile, and of course you can do this on your profile directly as well.
And the section for this, which is really appropriate for it, is when you click on your profile and you go to the tab Supplier Information, and there are two text boxes, one called Personal Comment to the Project Manager. There you can introduce yourself more in detail to the PMs, saying, list all these, why you know so much about diabetes or other medical specialities. And then there's a box called Introduce Yourself to the Clients. And there too, it's very important to list what you're really good at, what are your fields of expertise, and why are you good at it. This box is limited to, I can't remember how many characters.
400.
400, thanks. So yeah, you just have to be more short and concise there. But please make sure you've filled in both these boxes. And then on the last tab of the profile called Skills, you have the language combinations. If you open a language combination, you can add work areas to each of your language combinations. And it's very important to list your sub areas. So do not only select medical and healthcare general, but do also add these sub areas: oncology, pharma, diabetes, and make sure that you're visible there, because when the project managers are matching a translator for a job, they look at this. So please make sure that you've filled the profile in very well. Okay, I think that's all for today. So I wish to thank you, Charlotte, so much for coming and answering these questions, and to Philip too, who has been with us for a few webinars now. It's been great. So thanks to both of you, and I wish everyone a lovely day. Thank you for joining. Bye.